深い青の世界越えて巡り合う風が通り抜けてく
Hello everyone. Today we will be unboxing another figurine for the week. Here we have is a figure from the manufacturer's Proof. Is a PVC figure of the character Belldandy from the series Ah Megami-sama or Oh or Ah My Goddess. As always, before we take the figurine out of its packaging, just in case you didn't know, Ah Megami-sama or Oh or Ah My Goddess is a manga serialized in Kodansha's Monthly Afternoon in 1988 by the mangaka Fujishima Kōsuke, who's also worked on other series like Taiho Shichouzo in 1986, Paradaisu Residentsu in 2014, and Toppu GP in 2016. The series also has a light novel version called Shousetsuban A Megami-sama Shoshu, or First End, written by Toma Yumi and art by Hidenori Matsubara. There's also another manga adaptation called A Shukatsu no Megami-sama in 2019, written by Aoki Yuhei and art by Yoshizuki Kumichi. There's also a 4-com manga called A Megami-sama Chichaite Koto wa Benri Dane, or Mini Goddess, in 1996 by the original mangaka. The original series originally got an OVA anime adaptation by the same name in 1993 that also has a sequel movie that was released in the 2000s. And then there was a modern anime adaptation called A Megami-sama TV in 2005, consisting of 24 episodes, with a sequel called Sorezore no Tsubasa, or Flights of Fancy, in 2006, all by the same studio's AIC. There was also TV specials, Fighting Wings in 2007, Mini Goddess in 1998, and the most recent OVA, Ah My Goddess Together Forever, in 2011, all animated by AIC. So here we have is Belldandy, one of the angels from the Goddess Relief Agency, forming a contract with Keiichi, the main character, and you know the rest. So this is proof figure of Belldandy. So without holding you guys back, let's just take her out of the packaging and see how the figurine looks. So here we have is Belldandy straight out of her packaging, and as you can see here, she has protective plastic around the figurine, protecting the figurine so it doesn't get any scratches or scrapes on the paint. So just like we do with every other figurine, let's just remove all this excess plastic and see how the figurine looks up close. So here we have is more of a handling guide here, and as you can see, it's actually only one-sided while the other side is just blank. But taking a closer look here on the handling instructions guide, we do see here the text all in Japanese, and as you can see here we have is two of the pieces that you do get for the figurine. It's just a stand and the actual figurine, and there's not really too much to put together, so it's going to be quite simplistic and it's going to be a little bit fast, so you don't actually have to read too much of the text here that's in Japanese if you cannot read it. But as you can see, there's not really too much you could that you do have to put together, so there's not really too much of a worry if you cannot read it. I did notice that the paper here is actually a glossy paper, so it's actually a high quality print, so that's also appreciated rather than it's just a flimsy paper. So let's just put this on the side and move on to the actual figurine. So here we have is Belldandy's figurine, and as you can see here, the base is actually already connected to the figurine. So just like we do with every other figurine, at the bottom of the base it does have information such as the mangaka's name and other info for the figurine. And the base here is actually a translucent swirl because it's kind of has the effect of almost like this platform we see here sitting on is floating. So what we do see here is the little swirl of wind, or a gust of wind, that's holding the figurine up with this little stand here on the back. But you do see here they actually sculpted it quite uniquely, where you do see is her fabric here connected to the base. So it isn't only just this stand here that's holding it up, but also this fabric here on the side here that's actually holding up. So more of the weight is distributed for both on the fabric and also the base, which is actually a quite unique thing that I've only seen in a couple of figurines that I have, which is actually really cool. But having a closer look on her fabric here, because she's sitting on this platform here, we have is her long fabric, which is supposed to be like floating in the wind, because you know she's an angel, so she's in the sky, and her fabric is flowing around. And the texture work here on the fabric looks really nice. It gives it a realistic feel of, if you ever like have your sheets and you throw it around and it has all the creases, that's how this actually fabric look, which actually looks sculpted really nicely. And so going up here on the fabric, you do see here it has more of a blended color of pink and white. So it's not, you know, pure white, but more of the crease areas are more pink, and then the rest of the fabric is white. And you do see the sculpt goes all the way to this section in the back. And we do get a little bit more crease lines here, but I think the most crease we saw is where she has herself sitting down and towards the bottom area. And you can see the fabric kind of stops midway here on this top section here, where it blends into the top of her dress, where it's more of the blue. Yeah, so the detail work of the fabric folds are actually like kind of end off here at the top section. But it's still actually a pretty nice sculpt. You do see the blend here of the blue and the white here. So I'm not really certain if this is glued on or sculpted together. It kind of looks like they're glued on together, but I'm not really certain because it's kind of hard to tell. And I did want to say that this blue fabric here is actually a little bit more flexible than the bottom one. As you can see here, it's more flexible than the bottom, whereas the bottom white fabric is stiff. But that's not really too much of an issue. I mean, it's not really that you're going to be flexing the figurine around. But it's still a pretty detailed sculpt here, which I think they did a pretty amazing job with the way the texture looks on the fabric. We do see here's this blue fabric that goes all the way to this section on the top of her dress. And you do see it has a little bit more darker blue shading when it comes to the creases, but it still looks pretty nicely sculpted. And here's a closer look on the floating platform, where the bottom whirlwind is actually the one holding onto this section of the base. And you do see here she's sitting down on here, which the texture works actually looks really nice. And you can kind of see a good representation of dirt and grass on the top. And we do see here her floating or her hanging feet, where you do see the closer shot here of her toes, which actually have a glossy finish towards her nails. Texture work here on her, what do you call those half socks? I don't know the specific names for them, but it's actually a blue color, which I feel like could have been maybe a little bit painted better, but it's not really too much where it's kind of an issue. It still actually looks pretty nicely sculpted. The toes look really nice. You do see a little bit of texture work on the bottom of her feet. I can't really get a closer look because the fabric's kind of blocking it from me getting closer, but it's still, the texture work looks pretty nice. The gold here looks decently painted. It's more of a matted gold rather than a glossy gold, so you don't really see that much reflection on the little gold ankle. So here we have is a closer shot on her top of her legs here, where you do see is her thigh and a bit of her knee there, where the bend actually looks really elegant. And you do see the fabric here on her where she's sitting down is really well sculpted with all these creases around the fabric, which looks really realistic. It's the same thing we saw with the longer piece at the bottom, which looks pretty nice. Here's her hand sculpt where she's laying on top of the platform, and the sculpture looks pretty nice. That finger there kind of looks a little bit weird, but it's still actually a pretty nice sculpt. Again, going back to the fabric here, which is honestly the most amazing part of the actual figurine. It actually looks really realistic. And if you are wondering, she does actually have underwear underneath there. I can see it from my eyes, but the camera can't really capture. But if you were wondering, she does have underwear underneath there. But besides that, the fabric here with all this you see here, amazing sculpt work. It kind of looks a little bit weird, but but it's still actually a really nice representation of fabric, and it's a little bit more pinkish rather than white, but it still blends really well together with the blue dress that she does have here. So here we have is the top section of her blue dress, where you do see is the yellow strip that goes around her entire top section of her dress, and you do see the pattern looks consistent. I don't really see it breaking anywhere, but so they did a pretty nice paint job here with the yellow, where you do see it ends off halfway by her dress in the back. You do see also is this little, the stomach chains there by her waist, which are painted similar to what we saw with the rest of the gold parts of the chains we see around her figurine. And as you can see here, the little tips here of her hair strands feel a little bit fragile, so do be careful with this area. Here we have is her other hand sculpt, where you do see the detail work actually looks pretty nice. You do see is her fingers actually have a glossy paint towards the tips of her fingernails, which is like almost what we saw with her toes. The sculpt work on her arm palm actually looks a lot better, and the blue looks a lot better than what we saw on her foot. We do see we have is her bracelet there on her golden bracelet, and we also have is more detailed fabric work here on the top of her dress, where you do see it kind of looks like wings on the back of her, but I don't think those are wings. Those are just the fabric that folds downwards. And we do here is this long string, this yellow string here. It does feel quite fragile, so when you do pick this up, don't really pick it up from this end, because it kind of feels like you can snap that little yellow piece there. The little back section is a little flexible, but I advise don't really be flexing it too much. I'm only showing you this in video that you could do that. And we do see there's a similar paint job here with the blue and the yellow spikes around here on the dress. Same thing we saw on the bottom section of the blue dress. And we see is her hair sculpt, which is not that flexible. There's little pieces of it, or little ends of the hair that are actually flexible, but the rest of it is quite stiff. So I advise be careful with this hair. I haven't actually had a figure that snapped from the hair piece, but either way, do be careful when you are handling these figurines, just so they don't really end up breaking on you. And we do see the sculpt work of the hair looks actually quite detailed. Not too much in some areas, but we do see it does have all the little hairs are actually like individually sculpted, which is actually quite nice. Here we have is her headband here, which is kind of stiff, not too flexible. Similar with the hair, just be careful with it. You don't want to accidentally flick it and break it. So here's a closer shot of Belldandy's face, where you do see it has her unique distinct paint or little paint wear around her cheeks and her forehead. Here we have is the right profile, where you do see is her longer hair sculpted from the front, heading all the way straight down to the bottom. Here's her other side profile, which again looks actually really nicely sculpted. I really do like the way it looks. These cowlicks on the top feel quite fragile, a lot more fragile than the rest of her hair sculpt. So when you do pick this up like I'm doing here, just don't accidentally flick the hair, because I could kind of feel like this will break on you. But the paintwork here on her face looks really nice. You do see the little eyes there, where she has the little circulars around her pupils and the little white dots around it, which actually looks really amazing. And you do see her the top here. You do see it separates from her, from her cowlicks there, from the middle of her headgear, and the top section of her ponytail. Again, looks really nicely sculpted. Again, it does feel a little fragile, so when you do handle the figurine, just make sure you don't drop this or anything, because it does feel like you can accidentally break it if you drop it. But overall, the figurine looks quite amazingly sculpted. I actually really like the way this came out. So let's just place this down and move on to the rest of the figurine. So the figurine does come with this stand, as you can see here, which is a translucent stand, which I would assume this is probably to keep the figurine balanced and also to avoid any leaning issues in the future, because with all the weight that this figurine does have, there's a possibility that you can accidentally tip it over, or it probably could start leaning. Don't quote me on that. That's just something that I've seen with some figurines. And you could take this little stand apart, which is that kind of a nice feature. But if any case, even if you don't actually need this, I'd put the this stand underneath the dress just in case, for just to avoid anything. Alright guys, so that was Proof's PVC figure of the character Belldandy from the series Ah Megami-sama, or Oh or Ah My Goddess. And overall I gotta say is I really love the uniqueness of this figurine, the way that she's sitting on this little floating platform, which looks pretty unique. And I really do like the way that she's like has this long dress that's flowing in the air with a little wave there, which you'd assume that she's waving at Keiichi. And there's not really too much bad I can say about the figurine. I really do like the paintwork and the overall sculpt of it. Maybe they could have maybe changed her face a little, because I know there's some artwork where she has a little bit more smaller eyes, which gives it more of a unique feel, because I think they gave her more of the you know, the traditional anime aesthetic face where she has the larger eyes. I think giving her the little bit of the more unique smaller eyes that we see in some of the artwork would make the figurine look a little bit more better, in my opinion, or you can disagree with me on that. But overall the figure looks quite nice. I do not know if Proof is making more figurines for this line. It would be cool to see Erd, or what was the other girl's name? Scold? Scold? I think that's her name. It would be cool to have companion pieces for this figurine, but we'll see what happens. Anyways guys, what do you guys think of this figurine? If you have not actually checked out Ah My Goddess, it's a really beautiful show. I know it's categorized as harem, but I think it's more of a romance with the two main characters. Just in time for Valentine's Day, right? Alright, so I'm gonna end it off here guys. So I'll leave you guys off with the figurine rotating in 360 and other close-up shots. So as always support the original creators for a set series of figurines we unbox. Thank you guys for always supporting the videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Great figurine, especially for Valentine's Day, right?
実ればいいよねYou have 確かめたいビル触れた指をずら初めてだから頬が熱く燃える女の子は恋したら美しくなれる赤い口紅